Hello people, and welcome back to part 20 of the Noobs Guide to City Skylines. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And thanks so much indeed for all the support across the little Noobs Guide stream on Saturday, where we had a nice time hanging out together and doing some little suburban detailing, especially around our monorail lines. Bringing in some really simple park life patterns, some bush spices, and a little bit of selective commercial zoning just to help bring a little bit more importance to some of the quieter areas around the start of the city. So please do let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed the Noobs Guide streams. I am happy to do them as and when detailing pops up that needs doing that I would otherwise do off camera, then we can certainly do it on streams together. However, in this week's episode, we very much need to focus on kind of, again, more thoughtful expansion. And because we are now at 48,000 population, the next milestone of Metropolis is going to give us a new tile, which is very much important, of course, to continue the series. We need this big space here. Currently, with the space that we have left available to build in, there's not that much left. A lot of this here is going to be industry. Of course, the airport, we can't really build too close to that. And we've got very awkward map boundaries here to work with. So really what I want to have a look at today is when we want to identify a new space in order to bring out some different designs, how we can do it, how we can respect what's already here, alongside some new suburban ideas that we can bring in to the city. So, eyeing up this little space here today behind the oil refinery, I can already see that we have a connection available to come across here. We can bring one down here as well from this industrial road. And I think we can also split the highway here and also have just a one-directional highway come into this new suburb. Not everything has to be omnidirectional. I think that's something to take home from today's episode. But either way, let's expand New York's population and start heading towards the Metropolis milestone, shall we? Okay, so as always, when we're setting up a new area like this, we really want to have a look at connections to see what's happening. So this first one here, let's come on to our topography tool, and we're going to see that the height here is ever so slightly higher, which is great. So when I come into my terrain tools, I want to start leveling out this layer up towards the train track, because of course we could do another rail crossing, but it's not particularly ideal in this exact scenario. So we're going to do a slight elevation instead. Let's come ahead and grab this industrial road now. We're going to bring it down this little terraform plinth that we've just drawn out, also off the road guideline. And then we can just elevate here. Make sure we come up by 3 steps, and then this will be enough now to actually clear over the railway, which is great. And then we can come back down to earth, a distance of 12 units. And then we can draw it here by 10, and then let's throw in a roundabout just so we can start to distribute the traffic around this new suburb. I think I'm probably going to go for a nice sort of green median arterial frame here. Okay, so wonderful. This is going to be the start of sort of one side of the suburb, if you like, okay? So let's have a look at some things that we can look to respect. We have this sort of forest that we've painted in during the oil refinery build a couple of weeks ago. So I'm thinking we can start to generate quite a nice aesthetic by bringing this collector road alongside the forest and essentially just respecting the forest boundary, allowing it to hug it all the way around. Just using our freeform tool with no road guideline snapping here. Okay, we'll just keep these nice meandering curves going where possible. Okay, and then maybe a straight section here as we come towards the edge of the tile boundary. And that's just going to give us, a nice big wavy road network. Let's also do the same thing up here as well. Let's bring out perhaps a touch more. And then we'll go for a curve of 10. Repeat that on that side too. And then we can essentially just run this parallel with the tile boundary. So we're working with some pretty gnarly terrains here today as well, but we're going to be doing some things to help this settle in a little bit more. Either terraforming or detailing come the end of the episode. We're not just going to leave it like this. Okay, and then this road can come straight back up. There we go. We might just want to actually correct this curve now, so we can start with this guideline. So let's come onto road guideline here, and then amend this curve here, back onto the curve, find the road guideline, and then bring it back in. So that's going to fill our space with sort of collective frames, get a nice big wide road for traffic to move around on. I'm going to be mostly happy with this for the time being, I think. So let's also have a look what else we can do with the road network here. So we do have some form of centralization with the disaster building we placed in during the refinery build. So I'm just going to click the node directly out front, and then I'm going to drag it up to this one, and then release the point, and then we can draw it up here, which should give us a nice point of symmetry between the main building and essentially all the networks that now span off down the Noobs Guide city, right? It kind of spans off into the highway. The next connection I'm eyeing up is this one over here. So again, we have an industrial road. Now, ideally we could come and sink the rail further down here, but I'm happy with the way that this area looks. So I think what I'm going to do instead is actually something quite bold, but it does look quite nice. I'm going to bring in a little 5 curve with an industrial road, so we'll go for 5, 6 and 7. And then we want the 7 curve to be mimicked on this side as well, so 5, 6 and 7. So now what I want to do on a distance of 12 is start to elevate the industrial road up to 3 points. Now this aesthetic won't be for everyone, it is quite bold. We are going to be running a long section of elevated industrial road through the forest, but I do think that because it's something you don't usually see or kind of plan for in a city, it has quite a distinct and unique style to it when you run especially industrial road. If we kind of emphasize the point here by surrounding it a little bit more with Noobs Guide forest palette on one side, we can see, you know, just... it's a very unique aesthetic, isn't it? Elevated industrial road through a very dense tropical forest like this. And I'm really happy with it. Okay, it's unique and it's unique to the city. It's not something we'd see all the time. I can now see where this new frame is going to come and bend back down. So this is what we're going to do. We'll snap to a road guideline. And we'll bring that in. And then all of these frames now can amend just ever so slightly to fit the frames that we're working with in this part of the map now. For which a little curve tool with a road guideline is going to be immensely helpful. Some straight road tools. And again, another roundabout would be more than appropriate here if that's what you wanted to do. Okay. But very unique infrastructure now developing, and I'm going to be happy with that. It's also giving more layers of height into our train networks that are flowing around this area too. So now let's have a little chat about what we can do with some of the local road frames. So of course, whichever sort of palettes and designs you've come across now in your time, playing Cities Skylines as a noob can always be introduced into these areas. But I want to start talking about how we can bring in different shapes around the collector frames, and then also respect some of the curves as well and bring in different angles. So I'm going to maintain my little 3 tiles between each set of zoning. This is going to allow me to do some detailing, and of course keep the suburbs super walkable. I'm going to bring in a frame here. Now I know just for the sake of this build that I want a unique building as part of this new town, and I think that the hypermarket from the European Uniques is going to be more than appropriate within this space here. Okay, we'll just have it on the main road. It's going to be sat on sort of what is essentially Main Street for this part of the city. But there's some horrendous things that are happening. This right here, terraforming, is nasty. Let's get rid of this. So just a little bit of level terrain to get rid of the initial jank, and then a touch of soften will just take a bit of the sting out of those contour lines. Makes it a lot more palatable. Please don't just accept the vanilla cutaway. It's not nice. Okay, so we can bring this up. Now if we wanted to carry on bringing this pattern down, which is absolutely fine, you could, but we see now we're just sort of hitting this road here. So why don't we bring it up ever so slightly? And now let's start to break out some of our lines. Let's go with a nice big freeform curve here and create a new junction. Okay, it's going to slightly widen it out. If you do have a node controller and you're on the PC, you can do some very nice things with this. But we don't as of yet. Okay. So let's bring that out there. We'll come back onto a road guideline now. And what I'm looking to do is to match up with a guideline. And then I want to start lining up with the road guidelines on the same collector road. Now let's come in with a pure straight section now, snap to 180 degrees. And then we're just going to start bringing out these different shapes and patterns now. Let's bring another perfectly straight section directly down here. And then let's come in and start bringing in some vertical lines that are now going to start cutting up these new angles and new shapes that we're playing with. And again, we can continue to respect the 3 tiles between the zonings if you want to. Now everyone's preference on detail and palettes is going to be different here. And then let's now sort of focus on this space here. Let's see what we can do with it. Let's bring in some new frames. And then let's drop in perhaps another little small roundabout. And then we can have a roundabout in one of our suburbs, okay? We can bring this out here, and it's not quite in line, but that's absolutely okay. So a very small curve is going to be more than acceptable. We'll also connect people in here too. And then of course down into the new frames. Like so. So as I'm watching this road network develop now, and I'm seeing different sort of shapes and sizes come into it, I'm noticing that perhaps the curvature here isn't quite initially what I had in mind. So that's absolutely fine. Let's just delete this here, and I'm just going to shorten the distance that this roundabout sits off of the bridge road that comes out of this space. And then everyone can just be re-upgraded into what they were. So now, again, I'd like to run a little local road that's going to come straight down these spaces, where we do have some irritating jank. It's going to be fixed just by deleting the section of collector road that's giving you grief. And then bringing those curves back in. So where we have some of these larger spaces, this is a nice idea now to come in and snap to a road guideline somewhere along the existing frame. And then start to bring in zoning tiles that are now back to back with each of these spaces over here. Road guideline can help with this as well. So you just see how I'm looking to back up the zonings against each other. Slightly smaller road movements sometimes. You just see now how we're generating a little bit of symmetry in between the suburb. Not everything has to be perfect. And then we can use these little preset boxes now and hook them into different areas just to help generate some new and interesting shapes, which is very much what this episode's all about, okay? You know, we went for a very kind of thoughtfully planned suburban development a couple of episodes ago. You know, since then it's... But you know, if it's not your preference, then you don't have to do it. Don't think you do have to follow the Noobs guide religiously for those that are following. You know, bring in your own spins into it, you know, maybe some perhaps dead-end cul-de-sac roads that just finish off before the main collector system. And then we can bring these back down here. And just span off different designs now. Maybe save an entire chunk of the suburb or an entire chunk of the road network here to be parkland. You know, not everything has to be zoned. It can just be open space. Alright, not too bad. So right now we can see, although a lot of this will be hidden once the zoning comes in, that we're just getting a lot of this very nasty vanilla jank, right? So it's going with the large brush size and a little bit of soften. And we can just take the sting out of this ever so slightly with a couple of gentle left clicks. For the harsher areas, you probably want to use slope terrain and then bring a little bit of this up. If you do find you've got a real big chunk where the terraforming's just not playing fair, then feel free to shatter one of the road frames and then allow a little bit more breathing room for that terrain to, you know, breathe. Okay, you can maybe turn one of these slightly more awkward sections into a bit of sort of flowy rock parkland, if you like. Alright, so that's not too bad for right now. But otherwise, I think I'm relatively happy with this configuration. It can now just be expanded and designed as and how I please. Perhaps a road guideline would be welcome here as well. Okay, let's come on with a curve tool. Hit the road guideline of the collector and then bring it in straight into that. And again, it's just going to help break up those rigid angles that you might get into kind of a habit of constantly making. And, you know, it is kind of hard to break out the grid sometimes because, you know, you're looking at a grid most of the time, especially with the zoning squares. So it can be very easy just to continually fall into that grid, but hopefully a few little different designs and techniques here to bring in different shapes and patterns and connections can just help you form slightly more organic looking road networks that aren't just regular boring grids or sort of slightly more uninteresting curves. Alright, cool. So these guys are very isolated out here. If they want to get to the downtown, they are almost 100% going to drive, which isn't great. So let's review our public transport connectivity and see what's happening. Ideally, metro would be the ultimate way to get them over here. So we do have a metro ring around the first suburb, that's absolutely fine. And we do have a little metro line here that actually feeds straight into downtown. So I'm going to come onto this one. We're going to go off all of our snapping. Then we're going to create a connection here. Now we need to sink down a couple of steps here too to actually get under this metro network here, which we should be able to. Very small sweet spots, there we go. So just passing directly under this system. Now what we're going to do now is just hook in this metro through the city. Okay, so we'll also find a couple of opportunities to include a new stop. So why don't we go for one about here. This is residential, but it's high density, so it should just about withstand it. We will wait and see. Okay, and then we can get connections in here. Very nice. Again, we've come back to the same height now as the station, so we need to sink back down again. And again, there's an opportunity here now where I can continually plan in metro stops to now expand with this new line. and perhaps one in this suburb over here. Okay, that's going to be good. Maybe one for the forestry workers where they can converge with a couple of monorail stops nearby. Okay, and this can come all the way down and then it can come straight in. So I think this is going to be a good opportunity to use one of the transport hubs here. So we can probably go for the bus metro hub, because this has got 2 metro lines in it. And it will also accept buses. We could also bring in the intercity bus hub as well, which again will give us the possibility for accepting intercity buses in this part of town as well, which we might as well go for. So let's bring out a little road on a angle on road length to hold this asset first. Does affect the terrain a fair bit, doesn't it? So let's see if we can move it over ever so slightly, and then again we'll just do a touch of level terrain just to take the sting out of it, and then a little bit of soften just to round it all out, and any serious inconsistencies can be tidied up with detailing, of course. Let's also bring this connection through here as well. So really tricky when we're working with kind of immense terrains like this. Diamond Coast is definitely not the smoothest map. If you're playing with flatter spaces, you'll find this process much easier. But I think for the time being, I am going to be happy with having the Metro Intercity Bus Hub here as well. And now I just want to link the metro stations together. So we'll do this and then we'll have a look at the highway as well. So now I'd like to bring in a highway connection here. So I think a lot of us get stuck into the law that all highways have to be sort of omnidirectional. You can get on and off in both ways. But sometimes just a one-directional connection can really help alleviate the pressure. And there's something that we can do with this highway here in order to accommodate this. So let's actually delete a section of this highway up to here. Move a little bit of the rocks and the trees as well so we can see what we're doing. And let's come into our highways and we're going to grab the 2-lane, one-directional from the Mass Transit DLC. We're going to bring it up to the same height as this highway here, which is that one there. That's absolutely fantastic. Then let's snap into the grid here. So I want to make sure grid snapping is on. And then we're going to draw out a section here. That's absolutely fine. And then we don't want to delete this road too. This one's going to be in the way. We will reinstate that in a second. And then also bring this one up parallel as well. And then a little freeform tool here. We can now just split the highway so it flows in 2 different directions. We can reinstate the connection here with a little freeform curve. And then this one can now come across this space and we can start to play with some new layers. So let's align the next section of highway that we want to flow over this area. And this seems like a nice sensible spot here. Let's do a little bit of terraforming as well. Because if we don't terraform this here, then it's just going to sort of go a little bit up and down and wavy. It doesn't really look quite right. So this is what we'll do. Let's go ahead and grab a little bit of level terrain. So the pillars sit on the same level. And then let's carry on bringing it up. It's out to the road guideline now, and let's find a height where we can cross over at the rail intersection. That one's not quite there. So one more step, that should be good for me. Again, lots more layers now starting to develop. And then we can come down through the forest here. So we can connect this in. That's a little bit too sharp for my liking, so I'll do it over a longer stretch. And then we can bring this down, let's grab a little bit of freeform action, and then curve it into this road here. So it's just going to be some nice highway connectivity directly into this area. So yeah, the road's a little bit kind of wavy, isn't it? So where it does sort of start to dip down, let's re-amend this. Let's see there again where we've got a little bit of a dip. So let's delete that section. And then redraw it, and then just play with our heights until we're happy. Again, a little bit of a road guideline snap now with a curve tool. It's going to allow us to create a nice smooth connection into this point. Let's go ahead and change our directions. Not forgetting that we lost a connection into this area over here, so we're going to have to reinstate this with a touch of terraforming. Nothing too serious. Bring that down there, create a little bit of a gully for the road. Grab the industrial road again. No snapping, with a straight section. And we can just come straight under. And then connect into there. That's absolutely fine. And that's another little layer of transport height now, isn't it, for our industrial area. It's going to give connectivity from the highway straight into the new part of town. And again, it's more of this sort of elevated road through the tropical forest, which I'm an enormous lover of. It's very unique to this city, isn't it? Not something we've tried before. All new ideas that can be brought into play. But either way, that gives us a metro connection and 3 road connections, one of which is a highway, into the new area. So let's get some districts set up And then we can start to zone up and detail up our little central town square here too. And we're also going to name this district after one of our wonderful patrons, Currently Heather Hills. Thank you so much for all your support, Currently Heather. Really appreciate it, and welcome to the patrons. Also going to make this suburb European suburbia. I just really prefer the more realistic look of these residentials. You can see once they're kind of settled into their spacing, they're a lot more sort of realistic looking compared to the vanilla high level stuff, which once we look over at the start of the city, isn't quite as authentic as it. Like, these houses are nice and definitely have a place within a particular style of build, but for sort of generic, slightly rural, outer-lying suburbia, I think the European suburbia assets do us a much nicer job than the vanilla stuff. So we will definitely go in with European suburbia for this theme here. So now let's start bringing some zoning into the district. Let's go ahead and get a bit of commercial that's going to sit along our main street here. Now again, the terrain here can be very nasty to our build, so it's something we want to be careful of as assets come in. We've already got a little truck coming in here from our little highway connection, it looks like. The garbage truck heading out here as well. Is this a delivery truck? Which one is this? Printing press has returned to his facility. He's going to take a little elevated system through the forest now. There's also some more people coming down here as well. So I'm happy with this. So things start to go up. Let's go ahead and save our towers in the middle. We know that we want the walkability. Let's also leave a little bit of distance between sort of the louder main street and our first residentials. Then we can get these in. And likewise with everything else in the city, we don't want to zone too much at once just to avoid any potential death waves in the future. Keep your eye on your demands, slowly satisfy them. And again, all your favourite walkability designs can now come into play. You know, whatever you've found yourself becoming fond of throughout the series. We've covered many different designs like this before now. Can still be brought into this suburb as well. Okay, so we should see now the power will start to jump through. We've just dropped in a couple of earthquake sensors to sync the power from the oil industry area into this part of the city. Okay, and then just take some time now to admire the street as it grows. Do some detailing around if you wish, any repeated assets that you're not a fan of. You just happen to have, so to say, watch out for repeated patterns, but we have 3 laundromats all coming in the same area, which isn't amazing. So we see where we get this little sloping against the assets. Definitely don't want that, so I'm going to level terrain that away. Which does give us a harsher border here, but this can definitely be tidied up with terraforming and detailing during our detailing time lapse. I definitely don't want repeated assets here either. I do like the laundromat, but not here. And then just historical as you see fit. Enjoy watching the suburb grow up. And then just see what you think. Yeah, happy with the coin laundry here too. We'll see some more people get drawn to our unique building here as well. Alongside passengers arriving via the metro, which there you go, there's the first ones. Everyone's slowly coming in. So this is it now, just continue to satisfy your demands. Anything that you're enjoying, you can bring in. Definitely want some sort of commercial. So I think I'll save the front of the terminal here for some sort of park area. Especially outside the unique building as well. Then perhaps a little more commercial around the side of the unique now. And then definitely some facing into this sort of central little park here, which we're going to develop. Okay. Very nice. So let's go ahead and set up a park area. And we'll do a few of these here today in the suburb. Drop in a main gate. Of course, paint out the area to your desired size. Throw another park gate here. And then another one opposite the station. And then we'll leave the main road free. And let's just interlink these together now with some nice curving path networks. And a road guideline snapping a curve tool is always going to help with some slightly more sort of nicer and sensible flows in the path network. Now your park assets can be brought in, and don't forget you can mix and match different park assets from different types of park if you want. Doesn't all have to be the same. Probably might struggle for some of the zoo assets in here because they tend to be pretty large, and we will eventually get around to doing an amusement park build in one of the new tiles. But for right now, I think I'm going to be happy with some nice city park stuff. Let's go ahead and get a little gazebo here too. Perhaps a little restroom on the corner opposite the playground. Without deleting the path network, ideally. Certainly lots of fencing to frame the entire park area here. And now let's come in with us with our content creator trees. Perhaps drop in some sparse live oaks around the area. Make sure we're actually maintaining without decorations on the path network though. And then perhaps as well, some of the taller palms, or indeed pines if you're within sort of the boreal or temperate theme. And at this point now in the game, in your first city, you should be kind of stumbling across your favourite designs and palettes now, and taking inspiration from Google Earth. Have a look around your own sort of cities and towns, seeing how trees sit within spaces like this. Okay, just a couple of little park assets. Indeed, some careful tree placement as the road climbs up the hill. Just helps fill out that space, doesn't it? So, don't come into these new road network frames thinking, okay, I've got to zone everything up. Do designate some of the more awkward shapes for park areas. Let's continue to zone up our residential here. Keep letting everyone come in. I think it's just a much more realistic style of residential, isn't it? European suburbia. Definitely fits the theme for me, I think. Yeah, but I'm already really happy with how Main Street's starting to look. We can see some commercial that's coming over here too. Definitely happy with the ice cream parlour. We'll save one of these. We'll let this one level up. Of course, we're playing City Skylines, so people are going to want services. So let's start clustering at some services around the main street. We'll drop in a med clinic. We'll also grab a fire station as well. Let's go for perhaps the European looking one, the one with the red brick. Perhaps a little more appropriate for this area. So this here is where we really want to factor in service placement. This looks awful and there's not a vast amount you can do to fix that terraforming because it's against a road. So we definitely want to relocate that. We don't want that there. How about we have this? Let's just place it somewhere for right now. Just go ahead and put it there. Sort of clustered around the town centre if you like. Also a police station. Again, for which I think I'm feeling. The little European one. Maybe next to our bus terminal like that, okay? And as always, keep checking from different angles. Make sure you're happy with the developments. Especially when you're working with terrain in Diamond Coast. I am kind of glad that I picked Diamond Coast for this map in the end. It's really been a terrain challenge in the vanilla game. But I think we've managed to respect it. We can certainly see ideas coming in here anyway. And we can see buildings leveling up, so we know we don't need to make them historical. Yeah, I'm happy with all of these. It's just starting to get a little bit busy now, isn't it? How about we differentiate Main Street by upgrading it into a treed road? Okay, we'll have this run up a few sections. And then let's upgrade this into one of our trees. Could go for some roadies. Yeah, let's do that. Nice little flower pattern down the main street. Of course, keep an eye on everything else. High school, elementary, education demand. All your usual bits and pieces. Let's go for another high school. We'll see if we can partner this in one of the more awkward looking blocks that we have. How about this space over here? Okay, let's do some sort of high school / park design within one of these blocks. Let's come on to our angle and road length snaps and we will have the school, I think, sat here. Let's draw in a new frame to hold it. We're going to go for this one right here. Okay, I think I'm going to be on board with that. Let's also partner with some of our favourite park assets. Let's go for, perhaps a plaza with picnic tables directly outside. We'll save a space for a pathway. So now I know that this road here is sort of messing with my design, so I'm just going to trim that off and allow the assets to take priority. Let's go for some basketball courts directly behind. And then we'll bring up this road on a straight road tool now. So there's a classic Imperator bit of detailing you can do here. He uses this all the time in his vanilla builds. Due to the lack of car parking in the game, you can sometimes very crudely get away with using sort of repeated 6-lane roads and from the right angle on the right time of day during a full moon with the right lighting. This does look like car parking, so you can kind of get away with it. It's very rudimentary vanilla car parking, but it's there if you want to use it. Let's bring in this road here and then we'll complete the section and then come back to our small roads and then bring that one back in there as well. Okay, so super blunt, but it's there if you want to use it. Okay, and then we can bring our path networks through now. Okay, perhaps a little bit more commercial along the main street, and then what we can do is use a little bit of fencing now, whichever one you want. I think probably park That is the most appropriate. And then let's just bring up a little fence border around our sort of introductory plaza spaces. Maybe up until the corner here. And then perhaps a little bit of forest now between the zoning and the school. Just as a little bit of a boundary. Then before you know it, just a little combo of assets like this, it kind of just flashes out at the high school a little bit for you. And we can really see the hills of this suburb starting to come into play now. There's lots of little different layers and flowy roads up the hills are starting to make themselves known as the zoning comes in. With the space that you have in the middle of your car parks, you can use a little pathway here. Snap into the grid. Use one with detailing and then come and upgrade it into something with trees. Maybe the live oaks would be good with the car park actually. So that's not too bad. If you are going to use the repeated car park trick, or repeated 6-lane car park trick, I would definitely turn off the traffic lights at either end of them. It's not really a good idea, but there won't be vast amounts of traffic coming through here, so we should be okay. Okay, very nice. We can see again where we might want some more commercial zoning here. Again, to satisfy those demands as the residential demand begins to spike again, we can carry on zoning it up here. And again, there's little spots now of sort of forested, little walkability. Now, I'm taking this town in quite a rural vibe. If you wanted to take it a little bit more high density, you could, and I will certainly use some high density residential zoning today as well. It's not all going to be sort of flowing suburbia. Okay, so let's have a look at some of those high density patterns. Let's see where we can bring them in. I definitely want them clustered sort of in and around our main town centre design. So let's see what's going to go on here. Let's bring in a couple of patterns. And again, sort of sticking in and around your favourite sort of styles of high density residential are really going to help. So with this mound here, this is really awkward. Let's come ahead and grab a layer, and I want to start pushing this out into the existing road network. Indeed, cutting it away a little bit too. Again, it looks very harsh at the minute, but we know now that any terraforming jobs in cities tend to look awful before they look good. Got an angular road length snap, and I want to position just a little holding frame road. That's going to allow for the placement of some high density residentials a little bit more organically, if you like. Okay, so I'm going to go for patterns of 4x4 zonings here. And rocks and forest will always come into play here as well to help tackle these problems. But the main point of today's build is to get to 60k population. So we can just run over different designs and palettes in order to get this to happen. And any high density assets that you do like, just make them historical as they come in. Okay, I think I'm certainly feeling a little bit more high density to sit in and around the high school. Before we do move back to European suburbia in these smaller squares over this side. Again, we're playing city skylines, people love parks and whatnot. Let's come ahead and drop in some park assets for them. Perhaps a carousel somewhere within the town centre would be more than welcome. It's like these guys over this side could enjoy. Perhaps another carousel again. Maybe a bouncy castle too. And perhaps a larger park in one of our spaces. And we know that these parks can be expanded with your walkability patterns, so don't forget to bring them out. Okay, and then continually zone up around them. Perhaps a little bit of mixed use zone in here. Let's bring in a couple little blocks of commercial. I probably want this road to come down here now as well. So I'll have some commercial spaces there. And then again, our residential patterns can now take over. I'm going to try and keep some zoning off of this main collector road here. Don't want lots of people coming and going from there. And then a grid snap. Back into your walkability pattern, which we know we've saved 3 tiles between here. So we can let that design continue to flourish. And then it can come into these spaces as well. There's lots more coming through this space. Fantastic. So there we go, okay? This is just nice, happy suburbia growing up. Keep your eye on what is coming in, especially with high density residential. It does become ugly quite quickly. But I'm not averse to the occasional tower block. Happy with that. It's also going to help spike our population a lot more too. And then again, now we have our sort of zonings in. Let's bring in some detail in here. Let's go for a little bit of worn down nature reserve fence perhaps. Okay, let's allow this to hug the very tight corner that has developed around this road here. I'm going to bring this down and then connect it in. And then let's do a little sort of heavily forested garden on the corner of the road. If we were to repeat this design again on the other side of the road, we'll see what effect this has now. They're using fencing a little bit more creatively, if you like, okay? So within these little fenced in areas, let's do lots of heavy Noobs Guide forest. And then as we come down onto the street view now, and we're selecting high density assets, we're just going to get these little blotches of personality appearing throughout the suburb when we continue to use designs like this. Okay, we can see here where the terrain has massively affected the pathway, so we definitely want to bring in a little bit of a correction there, just so it's not kind of on a 45-degree slope, because that doesn't really make any sense. Not that we really worry about sense here anyway. Not usually. Okay, some rocks to hide the overgrowth, or to hide the terrain. And again, perhaps a couple of clusters of your tuftier overgrowths. And indeed, perhaps a couple of live oaks with some of your palms. And before you know it, that just looks a lot more organic now than leaving it sat against the slope. We can just detail it out a little bit more. Otherwise, things are growing, and it's not too bad. So, I'm just going to carry on zoning up, satisfying demands as and when they come in. And then we can come back once the town is a little more built out, and then we can think about something of a detailing time-lapse for today as well. Okay, so things are tooting along. We have some more parks in now, a little bit of office zoning around our sort of little school park area. And, you know, it makes a difference, doesn't it? Just a thoughtful placement of things. It's just huge, really, really huge. Lots of people come from the metro now. This side of the suburbia, again, has just been zoned and expanded as and when those demands have fluctuated. So I want to do one more thing before we think about a detailing time-lapse today. And this is to respect the dead, respect the cemetery, if you will. So we've got a little sort of design here, okay? I'm going to place in a cemetery on one side, and then again on another. Same again on the top and the bottoms. So, want to make a little cemetery park out of this, alright? So, of course, cemeteries aren't the best way of dealing with them, but I still think they have a place in the game. And the walls on them work really nicely for detail in a road. You know, just having the aesthetic of a stone wall against a road like this, it's nice. I think it has a place. Of course, you do have to use the Natural Disasters DLC to empty them. Don't actually wait for it yourself. But let's come in with some plazas. Let's go ahead and grab, I think, a couple of zoo plazas are always a firm favourite, aren't they? So we'll go for 4 plazas. This is okay. It's pretty simplistic right now, right? But let's see what else we can do with it. Let's go ahead with a straight road tool. And then we'll come up into the middle from each of these. Of course, it's not quite perfectly level, so it's not going to be super symmetrical, so if that bothers you, then just amend it to be so. Let's grab some curve tools, and then just hook these in together in sort of like a path roundabout, if you will. Let's go ahead and grab a large tree, something that you don't usually use, which in my case is almost exclusively the yew. Grab yourself some park props. Let's go for perhaps a little pavilion under here. Okay. Or little benches as well, maybe. Definitely a light in here too. And perhaps a bin with a little bird bath as well. And then just create sort of a little memorial park if you like. If you want to turn this into an actual park area and use a gazebo here instead, you absolutely can. But just a little park area here, okay? And then let's come in with some fencing. Again, I think something a little fancier is always in order. Or we could also use the hedges from the Park Life DLC with a prop line tool linear fence fill. If you are not playing with prop line tool for some reason, then you can manually place these, but I would highly suggest using the prop line tool. It comes vastly easier. Okay, and then let's just draw in a little sort of hedge fence, if you will. If that's not the most overcharged thing we've ever heard. Is a hedge fence. Welcome to the channel, everyone. And then why don't we drop in a little bit of park fencing behind that. And then before we know it, we've now just got almost like a little double tiered fence where we can mark out a little cemetery park, okay? If we want to make it slightly more interesting, let's upgrade the road frames that are in here. These guys will get power eventually, just bear with me. Let's upgrade the roads into treed roads, and then perhaps let's change those trees into, again, perhaps a tree we don't usually see. Maybe one of these. Okay. And perhaps a smaller roadie on the approach. Right. And before we know it, we've just made a little bit of a song and dance out of some plazas, which are going to draw people in and, of course, increase land value. We've also provided services for the people with death care over here as well. And we've got the aesthetic of stone wall within the town centre now as well. And I think it's just a slightly more interesting way of using up a block rather than just endlessly zoning. Alright. Again, more residential demands coming in, so we can continue to satisfy these. Also upgraded the tree patterns here as well, kept pines on the central road, palms on the central road, and then downgraded into these little numbers, which I cannot remember the name of because they are called horse chestnuts on the main road as well. Okay, and again, more selective commercial assets that are allowed to come in here. I do make them historical as you see fit. But otherwise, the town's growing now, isn't it? It's got a nice little sort of wave to it. I've also upgraded these roads here into 3-lane highway, just because it helps to force 2 dedicated turning lanes on the left and the right here, and without them having to sort of bottleneck into 2 lanes. So just a slight upgrade there. That's simple lane maths. We've covered this before. And it's something that you can bear in mind for this build too. However, guys, this does feel like a wonderful place for a detailing time-lapse. We are going to continue to zone up residential demand as and when it comes in, so we continue to climb towards 60,000 population, for which we are very nearly at 52,000 now. And a lot of these guys have a lot of levels to go up, so they will continually hold a lot more people as the town gets leveled up. Hopefully these guys aren't too far from power sinking now. We might just need to provide a touch of commercial zoning here. That should be fine. But we're going to come in and detail our roundabouts at both ends of the town. Continue our hedge and fence detailing around the cemetery park and fill these spaces out. Perhaps with some sort of nicer little flower gardens and whatnot. Plenty of designs we can get involved with here. Lots more selective high density residential zoning in and around sort of the main town square, and lots of overgrowth and rock detailing to hide some of the nastier terrain jank that has generated on this very uneven terrain. And then all our little bits of detailing nuances, hedges, fences, bushes, selective assets, and all the vanilla action that we love to tie this new development together and then go towards 60k population for that next tile. So let's detail up the currently Heather Hills and then we'll be right back. Okay guys, so let's have a detailing review. There's a fair bit to cover here. Of course, all the zoning has continued to be fleshed out in and around our preset road patterns that we did at the start. Also brought in a little post office with some repeated bush patterns around the side of it, just as a nice corner asset, which we're always fond of. The post office now. Detailed up our roundabouts in a couple of different fashions, some repeated nature reserve fence and live oak designs. And then also split off some pathways into the sort of, dedicated cemetery area where we have all these little park designs going on. And there's some people moving about here now too, getting back and forth between the different layers. Lots more selective high density residential patterns in around these more awkward shapes. And then also brought up a little second tier onto this next layer at this spot. So we just had a burger bite arrive. That will be absolutely fine. We'll keep you in. The Metro in-city bus hub is insanely busy. Check this during the D10 time lapse. It was like 630 a week. So the Metro line, and I've also drawn out a bus line too. That serves this suburb from here. There you go, you can see one of the buses leaving. So this is working really nicely. Nice big transport centre in the middle of the town for people to come and go from this area, of course. Further over this way, I have implemented some tower blocks to sit against the rail, which I think is quite an appreciated aesthetic, isn't it? Sort of, tower blocks by heavy transport infrastructure like this. I think I'm a big fan of that. And then also over here, doing more roundabout decoration with a circular tree and plant pattern. Brought in some of the rocks alongside a pathway up to the next Institute of Creative Arts, which of course is a high school from the Green Cities DLC. And then just tried to hide a little bit of the exposed terrain with some repeated rock patterns. And I love the way that the pathway kind of cuts between this and it sort of shifts sides. Really like this design, and it's a nice way of hiding terrain in a very difficult terrain map if you're playing on something like Diamond Coast. Lots more selective asset selection over here, and I've actually seen a building here. This one right here, the neighborhood shop. This is the first time I have ever seen this asset with the car parks out front of it. Never seen it after like 8 years now of Vanilla City Skylines. We still find assets we've never seen before. So we're still leveling up, we're still sort of gathering population. We're up to about 55,000 now. And once everyone in this area hits level 5, which will just come with the course of time, then we will have enough to hit 60,000. And finally get a new tile, which means we can carry on expanding and trying out many different builds. And if we just kind of take a look here, I'm really happy with the flow of this suburb. It's very up and down, it conforms to the terrain. We've not done vast amounts of heavy terraforming today. Very much like we did kind of in the opposite build, the very sort of thoughtfully planned and geometric road network suburb. There was a lot of terraforming here, a lot of sort of attention paid to the flow of the arterial and collector frames, whereas the one we built today is much more organic. It's respecting the terrain that it's been built on. Very little terraforming, only to hide some initial jank. I'm very happy with it, how it kind of sits behind the oil refinery. We've now got some activity happening over here, and I think it's come together quite nicely. However guys, that is going to do it for today. Well, let's thank you all so much for watching. If you have enjoyed the episode, likes, comments and shares below really do help me out. If you've really enjoyed the video, there are ways to support me via Instant Gaming, Patreon and merchandise below. And equally as much, if you haven't enjoyed it, then leave me a dislike as well. I'm really enjoying the Noobs Guide City, and I'm glad that you guys are too. It's really blown me away, the support on this vanilla series. I very much thought Ilos would become sort of the meat and potatoes of the channel this year, but Noobs Guide is absolutely keeping pace with Ilos. So glad you guys are enjoying it. Please do hang around for the cinematics and check out the enormous sprawl that we have developing in front of us now, right up to the downtown in this city. It's really growing. And it's starting to look good, and I hope that you are still sort of picking up tips from this series. Today's build was very much an accumulation of lots of little suburban designs we've picked up over the last 19 episodes, and combining them into respecting the topography, asset selection, when and where to use parks, alongside combining these big town centre designs with public transport and lots of interconnectivity with highways. This is it now. This is the overcharged egg way of playing. So I hope you're still enjoying it. Otherwise I will shut up and I will leave it there. Well, thank you all so much for watching. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day.